Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Nurse Mama Show, prescribing hope for healthy families here on American Family Radio. Here's your host, Professor, Pediatric Nurse Practitioner, and Mom of Four, Dr. Jessica Peck.
Well, hey there, friends, and welcome to my favorite time of the day, getting to spend time with you, prescribing hope for healthy families. And I've got a powerful show coming up for you. Our prescription for hope today is to rediscover childlike wonder. So often as adults, we may get jaded, we may get cynical, we may feel bitter at what the world has thrown at us, and we may think, is there hope for the future? Is there all this is? Well, I want you today to meet John O'Leary. Now, he's a two-time instant national best-selling author. He is the host of top-rated Live Inspired podcast. He is a transformative leadership coach. He's a husband to Beth for nearly 2 decades, a father to 4, Jack, Patrick, Henry, and Grace. He's a proud resident of St. Louis, Missouri, but he is going to share with us his story today. Once expected to die, today John teaches others how to truly live. And I had not heard John's story before I was preparing to bring it to you. And I will tell you, it has left an indelible mark on my heart, and it has deeply challenged me and inspired me to rethink my attitude and my expectations going forward. And I know that it will do the same for you. John, we are just honored and grateful to have you on the program today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Jessica, I have French doors in my office, and I'm hopeful that my head will fit back outside of them after that introduction. It's the nicest, most complimentary introduction I think I've ever received in my entire life. It is a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, I feel like I coordinated with, your family, and they were bragging on you, and you just have so much to offer. And I really mean all of this sincerely. And John, I want to start back at the beginning and tell us about the day that your story really began, the day that your life changed forever.
And the cool thing about that question even is it's more open-ended than probably your listeners are even aware. Like, we could talk about finding Christ. We could talk about meeting my bride. We could talk about when I recognize the brokenness doesn't have to define me. And like, there's so many moments in life, days that changed me. But the one you're referencing, I'm sure, was January 17th, 1987. I was 9. I had just witnessed about a week before this kids in my neighborhood playing with fire and gasoline. I grew up and still live in the Midwest in St. Louis, Missouri. And I was watching, Jessica, as these little boys were sprinkling gasoline on a sidewalk. They'd step back a couple feet, throw a match on top. The liquid would come to life. And as a 9-year-old looking up at these boys, 11-year-olds, I figured if they could do it, so could I. So the following week, my mom and dad are gone. My father's at work early. My mother's out with 2 sisters. I'm one of 6. The house is all mine. I went into the garage, bent over a can of gasoline. It's 5 gallons, it's like 40 pounds of fluid. Could not pick it up. And so I remember setting the flame on the concrete floor of this garage, bear hugging the can, and then trying to pour a little bit on top. And as I waited for liquid, the fumes, you could almost hear the sucking. I pulled the flame back into the container, created this massive explosion. Picked me up, Jessica, and launched me 20 feet against the far side of the garage, setting my world on fire. So that's the starting point of this long journey forward.
John, I heard you tell your story, and then you ran into the house, and it was your brother who found you and saved your life, and then you went to the hospital. Tell us what happened from there.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned even my brother, and I just want to spend just a minute with him. I stood on top of the rug in the front hall and was screaming for a hero, like praying for a savior. And, I'm thinking like firefighter, police officer, maybe my parents will come home. And it turns out to be my 17-year-old brother, Jim. He runs down the steps, sees that I'm on fire, picks up a rug, begins beating down the flames. I remember, like, after swinging like 3 times into the flames, Jess, he dropped the rug, pulled back because he caught fire. And then I remember he re-engaged, picked the rug back up, wraps me in it, carries me outside like a baby, throws me on the ground, jumps on top of me, rolls around, runs back into the house, gets my sisters out, gets the dog out, calls 911. 1987, the lifesaver of the year for the state of Missouri was not a
Wow.
firefighter or Army veteran, police officer. It was a 17-year-old boy, man, who saw this conflict, who saw this trial by fire, and was animated to make a difference. My brother Jim was my hero decades ago. He still is my hero today. And it's just a reminder, like, people who seemingly don't have the title can do mighty things in their life. And my brother Jim saved my life. I credit him. You mentioned the hospital. The ambulance takes me away from the burning house. They usher me back into this little room where they'll treat me for a couple hours before taking me off for surgery. And the first person who comes into that room after the doctors and the staff was my dad. My dad was a veteran. He's a small business owner. He was kind of type A. And as he's in the hallway, I remember thinking, like, oh, my gosh, he's going to be so mad. He's going to be furious what I did to his house. And so I'm all defensive. I'm all concerned about his reaction. And then I hear his footsteps get closer. I remember he pulled back the curtain, walks over to me, points down, and then this man, he's 41, just says, "John, look at me when I'm talking to you. I've never been so proud of anyone in my entire life. And my little buddy today on this morning, I am just honored to be your dad." And then, Jessica, he says, "I love you. I love you, and I love you, and there's just nothing you can do about it." And hearing these words, man, like, it just healed me. Like, it doesn't take away the agony of being burned. It doesn't take away the need medically for what this patient will need next. You know more about that than I probably do. But my father's love on moment one of day one of ground zero poured the foundation firm enough and faithful enough, I think, that allowed the rest of the journey to be built off of it. So, my brother Jim saved my life at the house, and the firefighters and ambulance workers rushed me to the hospital, and the nurses and doctors did what they had to do on day one. But had it not been for the way my dad loved me as I was where I was, I'm not sure the next bit of work done would have made any difference.
You know, that's so instructive for so many parents, because when our kids are in trouble, when they do something that results in an injury, a tragedy, something like that, they always think, oh, what is my parent going to think? Am I going to be in trouble? And John, I am amazed that you were cognizant enough, that you were aware enough to not only have that thought process, but to remember it, and that your dad was able to step in and tell you, "I love you." I mean, those words, that is how we need to respond to our kids in trouble. And when I was listening to your story, John, you know, I'm a nurse. I actually trained as a student nurse at a children's burn center, and then I went to teach there for a season. So I've seen up close and very personally just the devastating impacts of burns. And so if I told any of my colleagues or friends or any healthcare providers who were listening that you were burned over 100% of your body with 80%, I think it was, third-degree burns, I think they would say that the doctor who told your mom you had a 0.5% chance of survival, that was overly optimistic, especially in 1987. I mean, medicine has evolved, it has changed, and it's such an understatement to say your survival was miraculous. But even then, John, we're only talking about your physical body surviving. I mean, that was the first bar to clear. And you tell the story about an unexpected person who came into your life from the baseball world who helped give you that motivation. Share with us that part of your story.
I will, but I have to love on my mom for a moment. She's so iconic as in my childhood, and even to the way I show up in my life today. And so I have to just brag on her for a moment. My dad came in first. My mom comes in right behind him, but it's one in, one out at the ED at that point. So my mom is waiting to come into the room, and as she's waiting, the doctor kind of rushes by, and she says, "Doctor, tell me about my son." And he mentions the stats you just did, 100% burn, 87% third degree. And she says what she says, "Are you saying he's got a 50% chance of living?" And his response is, "Mrs. O'Leary, you're completely misunderstanding me. He's got less than a 1% chance of surviving this first night, and his odds will never improve." So this is his way of sweetly, as delicately as he can, telling this woman to prepare for the worst, because that's what is expected here. So with that news, she then enters into my room, and I'm laying there. I'm burned on my entire body. So it's a very scary situation. This is something you lived, so you understand what this mom is now looking at. It's dreadful. She takes my right hand. The hand is still warm, pats my bald head, and she says, "I love you." And then I say to her, "Mom, knock it off with the love. Am I going to die? Just be honest. Am I going to die here?" And she looked at me and said, "Baby, do you want to die?
Oh, my goodness.
It's your choice. It's not mine." And as a dad myself, and as a guy who spent years as a chaplain working with kids in hospitals, it's not at all the question you would expect to hear back from a parent who has an opportunity right here to let a kid know that they're going to be fine. Because that's the normal, healthy response. Seemingly, "Baby, you're going to be fine." But what my bold, faithful, awesome mom is putting in front of me is this gift of choice, the agency, man, to decide what you want to do about the next right step. Jesus is always saying things like, pick up your mat, wash your face, do your part. And even at age 9, she knew that she, my dad, the staff, the doctor, they can't do this for me. At some point, I've got to get engaged in the journey. And I looked back at my mom and I said, "Mama, I don't want to die. I want to live." And her response was, "Good. Look at me. You take the hand of God. You walk the journey with him, but baby, you fight like you never fought before." And on that first day, Jessica, in that emergency department, this little boy, flanked by his parents, man, made this covenant to fight forward, having no clue what a bandage change was like, or amputations might feel like, or debridement. All I knew was the fight was on. I was going to take the hand of God. I was going to fight like I never fought before, and I was going to have faith that the best was yet to come. So I'm incredibly grateful for the family of origin I had, the foundation they poured, the agency that my mother gave me as a little boy. And then if you'd like, I can still go into this announcer who shows up in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, for me as a nurse, all of those things just resonate with me so deeply, John. And I have seen cases like this. Most of them do not go the way that yours did. And I firmly believe that your dad's affirmation of love, your mom's delivery of courage in that moment of giving you agency and giving you the choice to fight you said you made this covenant with them to take the hand of God and to fight like you had never fought before. That is such a beautiful picture. I know that God gave you those parents just for that moment. And then he orchestrated another miraculous circumstance and continuing to bring people in your life alongside to fight. And who was that next person?
Right. Well, there's so many. So I read a book a couple of years ago called On Fire. And when they did the book jacket, there was a picture of me on the front of it wearing a suit, fancy tie and jacket with my arms crossed, looking out at the reader. Like, hello, people, look at me. I've arrived. So I wrote back and I'm like, hey, guys, read the book before you do the book jacket.
Not it.
Because the book has nothing to do with me. And so when they redid it, there's almost like it's called foil wrap. But when you look at the letters, you can see yourself in it. And the whole idea is view yourself as a hero in someone else's story. Because when you read On Fire, the whole thing is about how God used ordinary people to provide something miraculous in the life of a little boy and his family. And one of the most amazing individuals, and there are hundreds, but one of the most amazing individuals who arrived was a radio announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals named Jack Buck.
I'm going to hold you right there, John. Hang on. We're coming up against a break. Jack Buck walks into your life. Like you said, there are hundreds, I'm sure, that you can share. But Jack played a really special and unexpected role. I can't wait for our listeners to hear about that. If you want to read more of John's story, get his book, On Fire, The 7 Choices to Ignite a Radically Inspired Life. You would not be the only one reading it. It was an instant bestseller and really challenging and convicting. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more from John O'Leary on Living Inspired. I'll see you right after this break.
Whether it's a story about prayer in public schools or battles for biblical truth within our denominations, the American Family News Network is here to tell you what the newsmakers are saying.
We are starting to see a rebellion against corporate America's endorsement, coddling of the LGBTQ agenda.
The American Family News Network is comprised of news anchors and editors that team up to bring you news from a Christian perspective.
A TRO for non-legal types out there is basically just an emergency order that would have allowed Liam to go back to school wearing the t-shirt he wants to wear. And again, that t-shirt says there are two genders.
Not only can you listen to reports on the radio, but you can also visit afn.net for coverage of the latest headlines.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis out on the campaign trail was ready with an answer on the meaning of the word woke.
American Family News, reporters you can trust.
Are you being honest and dependable in your personal money matters? Honesty is one of the first things Jesus requires of new believers. When some tax collectors approached Jesus to be baptized, they asked, "Teacher, what shall we do?" And he said to them, "Collect no more than what you have been ordered to." You need to be honest to be effective for God's kingdom work.
Tune in to Faith and Finance with Rob West, weekdays at 9 a.m. Central on American Family Radio.
I know darkness is in the world, but that don't mean I got to kick open my front door and welcome it. Why would we continue to tolerate wickedness at any level? God knows the scope of your access and impact. He knows that. But he does expect you to be his ambassador in your world.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, friends. That song is You Make Everything Beautiful by Rebecca St. James and for King and Country. And today we're talking with John O'Leary and the miraculous way in which God has made his story beautiful. Burned over 100% of his body with 87% third-degree burns. He had less than a 1% chance of survival. After an explosion in his garage with gasoline, his brother heroically, miraculously saving his life. He's at the hospital. His father has told him that he loves him. His mother has given him the choice to live, the permission to die. And he has chosen to take the hand of God and to fight like he has never fought before. He's sharing his story. And John, we were just introduced to Jack Buck walking into your hospital room. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you have listeners from all over the country and beyond. So a little background on Jack Buck. He was a radio announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals, which was my boyhood team. I love baseball, and I love the Cardinals. And back in the good old days, the 80s, I was a child of the 80s, the way we used to watch baseball was not on television or the internet or even at the ball games, usually. The way we used to follow baseball was on the radio. And the voice we tuned into was a legendary Hall of Fame broadcaster named Jack Buck. So Jack caught wind of this little boy getting burned the night I was burned. He was at a charity auction. At his table, someone mentioned that this little fellow was going to die, and just keep his family in your thought and prayers. And remarkably, this man hears this, doesn't know me, but decides to make this situation his, like take ownership over it. So he arrives at my hospital that evening late, wearing a tuxedo that he still had on for that night's celebration, sits down next to me, pulls the chair up close, and what makes this all the more remarkable is at that point in my recovery, I'm wrapped from head to toe with bandages. I'm on a trach, which you understand, Jessica, but it means I can't breathe on my own. I also can't speak, so I can't communicate. And my eyes are swollen shut. So I'm in utter darkness, and I'm in pain, and I'm dying. And then I hear the voice of a guy who I loved, who I'd never met before physically, and he says to me, "Kid, wake up. You are going to live. Keep fighting. John O'Leary Day at the ballpark will make it all worthwhile. Keep fighting." And he stands, he walks out, and that's my one visit with Jack Buck. As he leaves me, my life has changed. Like, my hero has just stepped in and offered a little bit of encouragement and light. So I'm all in. He changed my life. I learned years later from my dad, who was at the nursing station at this time, that Mr. Buck walked out of that room, leaned his head against the glass door, and just started crying. And one of the nurses comes over and explains that the little boy's not going to make it. And this remarkable guy hears that this stranger, that he did his part. Visiting a kid once is more than you should. It's incredibly generous for this guy. He then comes back the following day into the situation that seems dire and desperate, sits down next to this dying little boy a second time and says, "Kid, wake up. I'm back. You are going to live. You got it. You're going to survive. And when you get out of here, we are going to celebrate. We will call this John O'Leary Day at the ballpark. Keep fighting." And Jessica, you understand this from being a mom of 4 and all the other responsibilities you have in life. Encouragement is underratedly important for wellness.
Yes.
This man came into my life not only to encourage, but to cast a vision of one day being at a ballpark by him in the broadcaster's booth, John O'Leary Day at the ballpark. And when you're struggling in life, to have a vision bigger than the woes of today, it makes all the difference. That man visited me for the 5.5 months I was in hospital. Eventually, we have John O'Leary Day at the ballpark, and it is a celebration of our collective work. The healthcare team was there. My family was there. The stadium was packed, and I had an opportunity of speaking on the radio next to my dear friend Jack Buck. It was a moment in time I'll never forget.
One of the things that Jack did that I think was really beautiful was just something really practical. And I remember back, John, to my own experience as a nurse in a burn center. And I remember in particular these 2 twin sisters who had been severely injured in a home explosion, much like you, and they lost their fingers like you did. And I remember just feeling overwhelmed with sadness as I cared for them, wondering, what is their life going to be like? How are they going to choose to move forward? And one day they gave me a friendship bracelet that they had learned to weave and put together with their knuckles. And they just wanted to give me an expression of gratitude for friendship that I had given them. And I remember just being so overwhelmed and weeping, much like you described, Jack, and wondering, could I ever be that brave? But we really were encouraging each other. God had put us together. And Jack mailed you a baseball one day, and that was another milestone in your journey, right?
Well, you've done your homework, so congratulations on that. But yes, indeed, similar to the bracelet that you're talking about, those girls probably had someone who encouraged them to recognize they can still do hard things. You were part of that. Maybe a parent for them was part of that. Maybe someone, youth ministry was part of that. But someone came into their life and said, even now, you can do the difficult stuff. So I hadn't yet really received that type of notice yet. The difficult part for me was living, and I did. But to what extent? What can I really do? I'm in a wheelchair. My fingers have been amputated. I just had John O'Leary Day at the ballpark. Now what? Because I can't do anything else. And the following day, as you mentioned, a baseball shows up in my life. It was sent by Jack Buck. It was signed by Ozzie Smith, the ball. And below the ball was a note that read, "Kid, if you want a second baseball, all you have to do is send a thank you letter. That's all." To the guy who signed the first. So now it's my time, Jessica, to make a friendship bracelet. I have 2 occupational therapists push my hands together. They had to quite literally break through scar tissue. We could do a whole episode on that. Sometimes you got to break through the pain to be free. So these women, Julie and Brenda, push through my pain. We write this note. We mail it off. And 2 days later, we got a second baseball signed by Stan Musial. And below that was a note that read, "Kid, if you want a third baseball." So I did. So I invited my OTs to come alongside of me, and together we wrote another note, mailed it off, and a couple days later I got another baseball. And I know time is money on air, so I'll shorten it so your people can get back to their lives. But Jack Buck sent a 9-year-old nobody, in finger quotes, 60 baseballs, teaching a little nobody that there's no such thing, that you can still do incredibly difficult things in your life, as long as you don't try to do it all by yourself. I think there's a lesson there. Like I would have never had a chance of writing back then with my hands the way they were, with the splints on the scar tissue as thick and as firm as it was. But when I invited those two OTs to step alongside of me, it wasn't that hard. It was somewhat painful physically, but each single note that we sent off together got easier to write. And in time, what that led to is not only grade school, middle school, high school, college, but I run my own businesses these days. I'm married to my wife, who, by the way, happens to be an occupational therapist. So she's an OT. When we first started dating, you talk about God's hand, we just started dating. And I'm sure she had questions about, like, this guy she's not with. And she goes off on a clinical, and the first clinical she gets sent to, she didn't choose this. She gets sent to a burn center about 90 minutes away where she is working with children and adults who've been burned. And she's seeing firsthand what her new boyfriend went through. Mm-hmm. And that's either going to repulse you or draw you towards someone. And thank God she was drawn toward me even more so after that. But we've been married 21 years now and 4 kids, a great life. In so many regards because of what this guy did, what so many people did to encourage the struggling little boy to keep stepping forward, keep the faith.
You know, I just imagine those nurses, working with your physical body, with your hands, pushing them together, pushing them through the pain. And you're right, John. I mean, I've been in those debridement rooms. I mean, there is physical agony that goes on in healing from a burn. It takes so much resilience, not only physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Those kinds of recoveries, those planes of recovery requires a completely different level of miracle. I mean, your brother had a miracle in intervening in your life, and I'm sure the care team worked so many miracles, and then Jack Buck was part of that miracle. But to survive is one thing. To thrive is a completely different story. And I think that's part of beauty of the childlike spirit. There's a resilience there that often is replaced by regret or skepticism or bitterness in adulthood. And you tell your story in one of your books, In Awe, Rediscover Your Childlike Wonder, to unleash inspiration, meaning, and joy. So, and you also share that your experience as a child launched you, didn't limit you. You have also said, which I still find absolutely almost unbelievable, that you wouldn't change what happened to you. How can readers learn from your life and the stories of others that are in that book, In Awe, having that childlike wonder, the resilience of childhood, to find hope for today?
Well, so the background on the book, so On Fire came out first in 2016, and just to put this all in context for your listeners who are like, well, good for him. I'm glad he's a writer. Here's the thing. I'm not. One of the most remarkable book signings I ever did was down at Dave Ramsey's office in Nashville, Tennessee. And afterwards, I go to a Barnes & Noble to sign some books. One of the guys in line was my English teacher, Mr. Kirkfoot. He stands in line, and this is a guy who believed in me in high school long before I believed in myself. He told me that I had a gift when I did not seemingly have one. Trust me. Look at my GPA back then if you don't believe me. So this whole journey has been miracle upon miracle, gift upon gift. And to sign the book for a guy who believed in me long before I believed in myself was awesome. So On Fire comes out. Because of that, I get invited to larger conferences all around the country. One of them was in Hawaii. So, man, I'm like tickled. I've never been to Hawaii. Here I'm living the dream, baby, walking to this fancy hotel. I got my suit in the bag, both kinds, both my swimsuit and also my fancy suit. But like, I'm ready to quickly get after the beach, man. So I'm checking in. I'm making sure the AV folks know that I'm alive and well, and I'll be there the following day. So I asked the lady in charge. I'm like, how's the beach? And she looks at me and says, I don't know. I haven't been there yet. So I say, wow, when did you get in? Thinking that you must have been on the flight right before me. This woman got in 4 days ago and hasn't looked out the balcony to see paradise in front of her. So I leave that conversation and I go to check in, and it's a nice long line to check into a very fancy hotel. And everybody's standing there in line with their arms crossed, except for the kids. The kids are running around this lobby on fire with joy. So I'm looking at this dichotomy between meeting planners and leaders and parents and grandparents checking into the hotel and children. And I'm like, my gosh, what do they have that we lose sight of as we age and travel and work, and how do we return to it? That's like the whole idea. What is it that children naturally possess? Why is it that Jesus says, let the children come to me? Is it really an age thing, or is it a heart thing? And I recognize then coming home from that travel that my little kids are reflective of this goodness of life, of this joy of life. And so I just started paying more attention to what it is that they have that we had and that we begin to lose through age, through experience, through struggle, through cynicism. And that's what In Awe is about, is how do you return to this childlike wonder for life?
I love that. That's one of the reasons I absolutely love being in pediatrics, because children can find a hope that we can't find. I mean, I remember the first time walking into a children's hospital and encountering a child who had a halo, which is like a metal device that's literally screwed into their brain. And she was the door holder. She was the self-appointed door holder, wanted to greet everyone. I thought, there is no adult on the planet that would stand there with a halo and open the door and greet people with a smile. They just wouldn't do it. But I see kids having that kind of joy. And you write in your book that the number one joy indicator, the one thing that will predict whether someone feels joy in their life or not, is the practice of gratitude. And this is something I've seen as well. One of my daughters had struggled all throughout childhood with a very severe immune deficiency. She was in and out of the hospital all the time. And I remember one time, she was debilitated to the point where she was in diapers. She was in a wheelchair. She couldn't get around, do anything. And I was just weeping at her bedside. And I just said, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you have to experience this. I'm just sorry that this is where we are. And she said, Mommy, I'm grateful. She said, I'm grateful for a wheelchair. It lets me go around places. It lets me say hello to other kids who are on the unit. It lets me find life and find joy. And I think, how do we find that? And John, I can't believe it. We're coming up on another break, but I want to know about that, because I know that even listening to you talk, you have a smile in your voice. You have a smile in your eyes, a smile in your face, a smile in your heart, but it is not always that easy. There's struggle. We can't oversimplify the struggle in that. So when we come back, I want to talk about some of the challenges and setbacks you faced along the way and how you overcame them, re-embracing this childlike wonder. We'll be right back with John O'Leary, and I encourage you to get a copy of his book, In Awe, Rediscover Your Childlike Wonder, to unleash inspiration, meaning, and joy. I know that it has challenged me to do the same. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this break with more from John O'Leary.
Sadly, as believers, we can be pretty self-centered and selfish about our prayers, praying for I, me, mine. The Lord taught us to pray the Lord's Prayer. It says, our Father, not just simply my Father, but our Father. We need to pray much daily for each other and pray with one another as well. That's so very important for each and every one of us.
Tune in to the Hour of Intercession, weekdays at 3 a.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Some guy who claims to be a girl is not science. I'm sorry.
It's not.
You just can't claim to be something that you're not.
No, we don't allow people to choose their ethnicity.
No.
Or their age.
No, I can't say I'm an Eskimo, so provide me with a free igloo. We don't let people do that.
We don't.
You're a male. and you can't claim to be a female because you're not.
Today's Issues, weekday mornings at 11 Eastern and 10 Central on American Family Radio.
How much control, unfortunately, the executive office does have to direct a lot of these procedures in terms of amnesty, what they can do, even though Congress needs to step it up. And we know constitutionally they should be making sure that the law reflects the American position. But law enforcement is the executive branch. And if you're not enforcing the law, then the law is merely just on paper.
Jenna Ellis in the morning, weekdays at 7 Central on American Family Radio.
The Stand provides a Christian perspective on current issues that are important to your family. Produced by the American Family Association, this monthly magazine is full of articles and stories about people who are making a difference in their community and around the world. Sign up today and receive a free 6-month subscription. Visit thestand.net or call 1-800-326-4543.
Your name is the highest. Your name is the greatest. Your name stands above them all, and the angels cry, holy. All creation cries, holy. You are lifted high, holy forever.
Welcome back, friends. That song is Holy Forever. And if you've been forgiven, if you've been redeemed, it encourages you to sing a song of worship. And we are singing a song today with John O'Leary, who's sharing his remarkable, miraculous story of surviving a burn injury that it should have been fatal. He had a less than 1% chance of survival. He's been sharing his story with us. And John, I was right before the break, I was just asking, how do you find the courage to be grateful in your story? How have you learned to re-embrace the spirit of childlike wonder and awe?
Well, gosh, that's a long answer. It's a great question. One thing is just fundamentally, I'm grateful for life, which sounds like, well, that's good, John. But tell us how you actually do it. And I think if you go to step 2 without really hovering over step 1, you miss the entirety of how do you step forward into 2, 3, and beyond. We, many of us, take for granted the gift of life, the gift of breath, the gift of being upright, the gift of eyesight, the gift of being able to hear, the gift of where we live, the gift of programs like the one you offer, the gift of your parents of origin who taught you either exactly who you wanted to be when you grew up or exactly who you did not want to become. And you learned also a lesson in that. So I've just been so mightily blessed in my life. And when I look in the mirror, Jessica, and as a leader medically and culturally like you are, candidly, man, when I look in the mirror, I see a guy staring back at me who has scars from his neck to his toes. My face was spared, but the rest of my body has third-degree burns. You don't get over that. It doesn't ever fade in time. So every single time I look in the mirror, I see brokenness. And if I'm not careful, and this is what society does, and not only does it do it, we encourage it, I could become a victim to those scars for the rest of my life. And just look at all the things that has robbed me of physical beauty, athleticism, places I could have gone, people I could have dated, million things that was robbed from me because of that fire. Instead, I look at these scars with this profound sense of awe that in spite of childhood agony, we endured. In spite of what should have claimed my life, as you've said several times in this program, somehow this little kid goes on to survive and in time thrive. And so when I look in the mirror and I'm reminded daily of the miracle of my life. So the very first thing I encourage your listeners to do is to do likewise. Instead of looking at the bags under your eyes or the gray peeking through the dark in your hair, or a million things that are reminding you of what you're not, start with what you are. And if you end it there also, it's enough. There was an old theologian who said, if the only prayer you ever offer are the words, thank you, that's enough. And I think many of us are so busy in our days that we forget to utter those 2 important words, like, God, just thank you, my goodness, thank you. So I've learned from my dad. My dad has Parkinson's disease. He's nonverbal these days, but he's the most grateful person I know. He's impressively grateful for the little things. So I think leadership and gratitude and life and faithfulness are caught. They're not taught, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Words are hollow and cheap so frequently. I saw gratitude modeled in our family. I saw faithfulness modeled in my family. And now with my little ones, they taught me a lot when they were little. They teach a lot when they're 3, 4, 5, 6. After that, though, it's our job as parents to make sure we're teaching them and instructing them in the right way. So now the very same lessons they taught me about inspiration, about encouragement, about inclusivity, about awe, about gratitude, I'm trying to put back in front of them, not only in words, but in deed.
Well, you know, I think that gratitude is so powerful. I actually call it vitamin G because it has such a profound impact on your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. And we see this reflected in Scripture that when we give thanks, the peace of God will protect your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. I believe that that means physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually. It lowers our blood pressure. It decreases our risk of heart disease, but it also gives us a better outlook on life. And we're told in everything, give thanks, for this is God's will for you, not for everything, but in everything. And that's what I see you doing, John, is in those circumstances, giving thanks. And now you're a dad, you have 4 kids. How has your experience changed your perspective as a dad going forward?
Well, I've learned my parents were a lot smarter than I thought they were when I was a teenager. Turns out that they're brilliant. It just took me to have children to recognize how brilliant they are and were. So that's one thing that's changed. My depth of being able to love has changed. I thought I loved life, and then I got married, and then I realized, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And I thought that was it. And then I had a little one, and his name is Jack. He's named after that radio announcer, Jack Buck. And I thought, my gosh, like now it's complete. And then we had a second little guy, and then a third, and oh my gosh, then we had a girl. Holy cow! And this heart that I thought was like, you know, like when you fill a phone battery to 100%, you think, well, there it is. And then you recognize with love, it's not like that at all. It can expand so far beyond that 100%. So these children have taught me how to love and how to slowly let go again and again in life. Like they're not yours. Everything we have, you hold with an open palm. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning to increase the agency to love them well, while also at the exact same point. And this is what I'm so bad at. So I need to listen to your program more so I can get better at this part, how to let them go. If I do my job right, it means they don't really need me. That doesn't mean they don't want to party with that from time to time or hang out and watch a movie with them. But it means they're not reliant upon me anymore. And so I'm as my oldest now is a freshman in college, and then downward from there, every other year we've had a child. It's to raise them so well that they can soar into life. Ultimately, look back and give thanks and come back and visit and encourage and love me. But I'm learning how to slowly let them go, and that's what these kids are teaching me.
You know what's really beautiful, John, is that I'm sure that your children look at your scars and they're inspired by them. They're encouraged by them. They're a visible reminder of your resilience, of your tenacity, of that decision that you made so long ago at your hospital bed to make a covenant with your parents and grab the hand of God and to fight for your recovery, and your children will benefit from that. And it's just interesting to look at because, you know, my story, I don't have physical scars, but I have really severe emotional scars that are not visible. But my prayer is that my children look at those, they look at the evidence of those, and they see God's faithfulness in my life, and they see hope. They see imperfection, they see failures, they see flaws, but they see recovery and resilience. And one of the stories that I loved that you told in your book was about your son bringing his glove to a baseball game and being so expectant. And that's where we can learn from them. Yes, they're learning from us, but we learn so much from them. So tell us about that, about what you learned from watching your son just bring his glove to the game.
Yeah. So speaking of scars, just for one moment before I talk about bringing your glove, my little girl, Grace, started preschool years ago now, and her friend afterwards drops off her backpack in my hand. So this little 4 or 5-year-old has now seen Mr. O'Leary for the first time. And she says to me, "What's wrong with you?" And I don't answer right away. So she turns to her friend and says, "Grace, what's wrong with your dad?" And then Grace looks at me, looks at my hands, recognizes what's going on. She's only 5, you know,
Wow.
so this could go in a million different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And then this little girl, my daughter, says to her friend, "Nothing's wrong with my daddy. He just got burned when he was a little boy.
Oh.
He's all better now." And so the amazing thing about our kids is I don't think they're impressed by me or the journey or the books or the platform or the scars.
Oh, yeah.
I think they just recognize the goodness in all those things. Like it's just who we are as a family, as a community, and I appreciate that about the kids. They're not impressed. I'm just their dad, and I love that normalcy and that safety. You talked about my little boy. I'm in my office today as you and I take this call, and I'm looking at a picture of him right now. His name is Patrick. He's the second born. He's the optimist. He's just lit with joy. And one of the embodiments of this is he brings his baseball glove to every single game we go to.
Mm-hmm.
So every summer I take him on a little daddy trip. I go to a speaking event. They get to look at Dad's calendar. They pick the location, and we go there. So the first summer he picked Kansas City. Second summer, Pittsburgh. Third summer, I'm drawing a blank on Cincinnati. So now 3 cities this kid has picked consecutively. He brings a glove. And the very first time we went together was in Kansas City. He catches a foul ball.
Oh, my goodness.
I've been alive
Amazing.
now for 45 years. I've never caught a foul ball. In his first travel trip with Dad, he catches a ball, which is remarkable. And you can chalk that up as dumb luck, beginner's luck. But the thing is, he brought the glove to the game. I did not. I went out several times to get hot dogs and soda. He did not. He stayed in the seats. I went to the restroom 2 different times. He did not, because he knew if he left, there's a greater chance he won't get the ball. I talked to my friend to the left quite a bit. I looked down at my phone quite a bit. This kid was laser focused the entire time. So when the opportunity presented itself, he was prepared. A foul ball came screaming down the line. I, with all my masculinity, ducked. This kid stands up, man. He's lasered in, has a little left hand go up in the air, brings it down, looks at me, and says to me, "I told you I was going to need the glove, Dad." Because I've been begging him, leave it in the car, man. It's 150 in Kansas City. Leave it in the car. You're going to lose it. So he brags, "Now, I told you I would need it." I could slowly play out these stories of how it happened again in Pittsburgh and then again the following year in Cincinnati. And then one more year, the 4th year, after the book came out, in Detroit. You're going to think this is a lie. Jessica, I'll send you the pictures of the 3 balls and the video taken from the guy behind us of him catching the 4th ball.
John, that is
true stories of
unbelievable.
A kid. Medically, you guys call it expectancy. In fact, the difficult thing with pharmaceuticals is they don't know how to do tests anymore, because it turns out whether they get the real drug or not, in both cases, patients get better. Regardless of whether the actual animating drug is in the medicine they're giving you or not, in both cases, patient health improves. Because the power of expectancy, if you think something's going to happen, amazingly something begins to happen. It's a real deal. Why this matters is if you and I look at the world through cynicism, through negativity, by hating the people on the other side of the aisle, or people who don't worship like you and I do, or look like you and I do, it should not surprise us when we begin acting out on that. And if we begin instead drawing people back into this conversation with expectancy, with wonder, with awe, it should not surprise us also that we can return to this gift of family, of opportunity, of optimism. So Dr. John now will give a diagnosis. Tonight when you go home, don't watch cable news. Don't watch it. Burn the paper in the morning. Go through life like your children do and like your great-grandparents would, where they look east and they watch the sunrise in the freest country in the history of the world. That is a very wise way to begin your day or wrap it up. In nature, in awe, in wonder. And you'll have what Patrick has, which is joy in your heart to bring the glove to work.
Well, John, these things that you're saying are all congruent with the 52 habits for healthy families that we're walking through here together as a radio family. And one of those is gratitude. One of those is having that morning routine. And one of those, a lot of those, we talk about living at the speed of a smartphone, living distracted where we are missing it. And one of the things that we are doing is not listening to our kids with our face. We are listening half-heartedly, and we're missing so much life. And they are not not missing it, and they want us to not miss it with them. So how do you be physically present but emotionally absent? How have you fought against that as a dad?
Yeah, and in some regards, it's even more difficult for me because I do travel for work. I leave today and I head out to Los Angeles for a couple of meetings and then onward from there. And so what I have learned is the gift of being present where you are. When I'm at work, Jessica, my head is down. I'm just going to go to town. Like I really work hard when I'm working, which then liberates me. When I'm home, I'm all theirs. The phone is off. Social media is off. You can't find me because I'm their dad. You mentioned this in the way you framed the question. John, they're noticing. Absolutely right. Not only are they noticing when you're not engaged, they're also noticing what they should do when they age themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not paying attention to them right now, why in the world, once they're free, why would they pay any attention to you? You've taught them how to perform. You've taught them of looking down, of listening to every bell and whistle and vibration in your pocket and the vitality, the importance of that over the gift of the life in front of you. So we have all been in meetings where you're talking, you're sharing your heart with someone, and then they feel something. They look down and they break that bond. How dare us break that bond with our children? It matters enough that we should be intentional. Put the phone off. Don't worry about it. The emails will wait. Be with the ones you love. When you're in work meetings, this also matters at work. Be present. Put it on Do Not Disturb. Every bell and whistle does not need to have your attention. Let the dopamine hits come later on when you take a walk with the dog. So that's when you can get your dopamine hits. Don't let Facebook steal it from you.
So challenging. I could talk to you for a whole nother hour, but listen, you are missing out if you are not listening to John's story. Get his book. John, thank you so much for inspiring us to rediscover childlike wonder. We'll see you on the next episode.